Welcome to the Autism Outreach Podcast. I'm your host, Rose Griffin. I'm really excited to be joining you today, and I wanted to make sure that you check out abaspeech.org. We are launching our new toddler preschool autism course that's all about how to get started with communication. I'm so excited about this course. It's the culmination of my 20 years in the field as a speech language pathologist, and 10 of those being duly certified as a BCBA. It's a great course for parents and professionals alike. So if you're a parent and you have a struggling communicator at home and you want to know how to get started, this is a great course for you. And I'm just so excited to get it out into the world to help support you in your home. Today, I had a great chat with Allison Fors. She is a speech language pathologist, and she's also a product developer. She has an amazing Instagram feed where she shares amazing resources, tips, facts about speech therapy, various areas with a focus on early intervention. And so today we talk all about milestones. What are milestones for speech and language? How can you, as parents or providers, analyze those milestones and making sure that we look at not just a milestone of where a child should be, but looking at the whole child and making sure that we understand the whole scope of where that child has been and that child's journey. I can't wait to dive into this episode. Such great information. Let's get started.
You're listening to Autism Outreach Podcast, a podcast full of ready-to-use strategies to help those with autism strengthen their communication skills. Here's your host, Rose Griffin of ABA Speech, a speech therapist and board-certified behavior analyst who shares tips you can use in your next therapy session.
Thanks for joining us on episode 37. Wow, that seems like a lot of episodes. And we have a great show for you today, a great episode. We have with us Allison Fors from Allison Fors, Inc. And we were just chatting before I started recording that I feel like we know each other, even though we're just meeting live right now for this episode. I know that she is a speech language pathologist, and you create amazing resources. I use a lot of your boom cards, and I didn't know what that was until the pandemic started. But now I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay. Boom cards. And so we're really excited to have you on, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad I could join.
Yeah. And I always love, you have a really wonderful Instagram, and you're always putting really wonderful graphics up about milestones and early intervention and really a lot of really great topics. And I think topics that people that are listening who are parents and also professionals will really benefit from understanding, what are milestones and what does that even mean? Because I know that when you're going through kind of that assessment process, I actually have a friend who whose child is going through kind of early intervention and all of those things. And I've been just talking to her as a friend, not as a professional. But people have a lot of questions. And I think we don't realize when we're speech therapists how much knowledge we really have when we're talking to parents. It can just be so very overwhelming, all the information and things like that. So I'm excited to break it down today for everybody. But can you tell us a little bit about you and your background, how you got into the field and all that great stuff?
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I blog at AllisonFors.com. I've been creating resources for probably about 5 years now. Right now I am home with my 3 and 1 year old. So I'm a bit of a stay at home mom / work during nap time type of situation with TV and all that stuff. Which I love though. I love being home with my kids, but I have worked, I've worked in different schools. So K through 12, all the grades. I've worked in private practice in a clinic setting, which was, I think, more my forte. I think I enjoyed that more. Specifically, I was in a clinic with PTs and OTs, which was awesome to be able to collaborate. And I learned so much, especially from the OTs with all that sensory stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like it made me a much better clinician, seeing the child with that OT lens. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. What else? We like just moved into our first home this April. So I've also been spending so much time just trying to like buy furniture.
Right. So you're busy. Oh my gosh, a 1 and 3-year-old. And yes, your kids are adorable. And I saw that on Instagram. I love social media, but you're doing, was it wakeboarding? We just bought a boat this summer. So I saw this picture you put up, or maybe it was a video, and I was very impressed because I just kind of like dipped my toe off the back of the boat. I submerged my body like twice this summer. That was kind of big for me, but no, I did go on the tube. That's right. But so are you like you guys have a boat and do all those types of things?
My parents have a boat. We live 20 minutes from them and they live on a lake. So they have a boat on a lake. So I've been boating. I grew up boating a ton.
Oh, that's nice.
And what's really fun is this is the first summer that I took my son wakeboarding. So he's 3, but I actually put him on my board with me. And even last time I'm like, can I get away with this or is he too little? So it was fun to actually do it with him. And so the video was funny because he wouldn't put his feet on the board. So I'm basically like holding him up with one arm.
I saw that.
The rope with the other arm. But he said he had fun. So I'm like, okay, that's
wow. That's awesome.
Want to be a bad experience and to scare them. So
yes, exactly. I was like, whoa, she is like doing it all out there. That was very impressive. I was like, okay, this is awesome. Yeah. Very cool. No, I love that. I love Instagram I talk about social media all the time. I feel like I was just making TikToks before we logged on. I made one all about my top 3 favorite speech therapy resources that I love to use. I think I talked about Epic Books, Go Noodle, and Jack Hartman. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Jack Hartman? I haven't heard of that one. Okay. That's a good one. It's just like
a YouTube channel.
Yeah. It's a YouTube channel and it's like preschool videos and it's really cool. Good. Yeah, you have to check that one out. Well, that's so cool. So today I know we're going to be talking about speech language milestones. And so can you just kind of tell us if we have parents listening, just kind of like, what are milestones? Because I think sometimes parents, we as parents know we do like the questionnaire at the doctor. And, I know I talk to with my private practice, I see a lot of kids in their home. And a lot of the people that I'm working with now, say, my child was talking, but they weren't really talking to anybody, like some of my kids with autism. Or, I have some kids that I'm seeing for early intervention that don't have autism. They're just kind of struggling communicators, kind of late talkers. And their parents say like, gosh, I never really realized that my child wasn't talking until, my friend said something, or I was at a family function and then somebody mentioned it. And then they think to themselves, oh my gosh, like, should I have seen something? Should I have noticed something? Mm-hmm. So can you talk to us a little bit about like, what do we even mean by milestones?
Yeah. So, I feel like that's such a big word in like the development world, like milestones. But what's funny about that is like, we throw it around all the time, but like, what even is a milestone, right? Like what quantifies a milestone? So a milestone is what like 90% of children are doing at a specific age.
Right. Okay.
So most kids are doing that thing, whatever it is at that age. But the hiccup is sometimes we interpret milestones as averages. When an average is what 50% of children can do at a specific age. So yeah, like a parent or even a pediatrician will pull up a milestone chart and be like, okay, so this 24-month-old who has 40 words, let's look at the milestone chart. And they see that the milestone is 50 words at 24 months, but the average is 200 to 300 words. So when you're looking at the milestone, you're like, oh, they're not that far behind. But when you look at the, oh, wow, you see the larger gap. So milestones are super, super helpful when looking at development. Even as a parent, you're looking because you want to know if your kid's on track for speech and gross motor skills and fine motor skills and all these feeding. There's like a million things. And I'm a parent, so I'm well aware of like the stress involved with like, am I doing enough for my child?
Yes.
To like develop and learn and grow. So yeah, that's what milestones are. Okay. When a research study is done, and that's what 90-ish, it depends sometimes on the study, but about 90% of children are doing at that age.
Oh, that's good to know, because I feel like we just don't talk about that a lot. I feel like I use the word milestones often, probably when I'm talking to parents. But like to really define it, that's kind of tricky. Like I haven't really
Yeah.
thought about that in quite a while. Maybe since I was like scrolling through your Instagram or like on the writing a blog post, like sometimes I'll write blog posts about these are the milestones, for different ages and things like that. And, ASHA.org has really good information. That's kind of our speech therapy organization for different milestones, for different ages and when children should be doing different things. But do you have any other resources for, like, is that your favorite resource? Because I know ASHA.org has like a public page where they have, different ideas about what a child should be doing at different stages and things like that. But are there other resources out there for parents if they're kind of worried about their kids' development?
There's like so many websites out there. So ASHA's I feel like it's pretty like superficial. Like it's a really good overview, like simple overview of everything. A resource that I've used for a long time and love, there's a company called Systems, and they have a free download. What is it called? It's like communication milestones or something like that. So you can download
Is it
that.
like a PDF book? Is it with the orange cover? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It has an orange cover.
I feel like somebody always posts that. Yeah, we should put that in the show notes. It's a really good, it's informative. It really breaks things down. Yeah.
Easy for like parents to understand. It's not necessarily like speechy terms. And it's all broken up into, there's like feeding and oral skills, and there's the articulation, speech sounds, and reading, comprehension.
Right.
So it's broken up into things like that. So I've created a couple resources for developmental milestones. So I've like combed the internet, and there are a lot of websites out there with a lot of information that you can find. So even Googling it, but of course, Google. I don't know.
You never know what you're going to find.
Googling it, you hope it's like the correct information.
Exactly. I always tell people too, don't go into a Facebook group and ask a question because you never know. I think there's actually a Facebook group that's kind of like about home speech therapy. I'm not sure how I get in these Facebook groups. I'm actually trying to wean myself off just that social media platform. I kind of like some of the other ones better. But yeah, you never really know who's going to be answering your question. I mean, even from a professional standpoint, like a lot of these speech therapy groups may say like, are you a speech therapist? Because I have a speech therapy group called ABA Speech SLPs. And I just trust that you're telling me the truth. I'm not going to do a deep dive on your profile, to see if you're a speech therapist, unless your profile picture, I don't know. But, you just never know who's answering these questions. So some of these resources are really good. I'll try to put that Systems one up because I feel like I see that posted every once in a while in different groups. And when you see that it's free, you're like, oh my gosh, this is such good information.
It's a lot of good information.
It is.
Yeah. That's probably like the most concise one out there.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And then ASHA is good too. Like, so if you're listening and you're a parent, ASHA.org has a lot of good information about different milestones. And what are the different areas that you think that if a parent was thinking like, oh, I don't know, I feel like, is my kid talking enough? Or are they eating the right foods? Or are they, like have sensory overload? Are there different areas where you think there are milestones, that would be listed that might be beneficial for parents?
So I think a big thing with speech communication is understanding the difference between expressive vocabulary and receptive vocabulary.
Right.
So expressive is like oral communication, like what the child is expressing either verbally or through signs or gestures, like words. And then receptive is understanding. So a child will typically, a typical child will have a higher receptive vocabulary because they can understand more than they can produce. So understanding the difference between that and knowing that a child, like if you have a pre-verbal child, understanding that like gestures and facial communication, like, are they doing that? Are they pointing? Are they clapping, waving? Are they communicating through gestures, things like that? So definitely looking at that. If you're concerned about words, which I think is the number one concern for parents of young children, like toddlers, seeing what your child understands versus expresses. if they're not doing really, a lot of words, looking at the gestures and the communicative intent there,
Right.
what are they able
Yeah.
to express? In terms of like sensory, that is more like the OT realm. So you're probably not going to find a lot of that on ASHA, but
Right.
that is like something that is so critical for all parents to know, even of neurotypical children. Like I
Yes.
see my 3-year-old son and he's having a hard time. The first thing I think, is this a tantrum or is it a meltdown? Right? Because a meltdown is sensory related, and how I approach that is very different.
Right.
So,
oh man, I'm glad you weren't with me today because I took my three kids shopping 45 minutes away from my house. There's this place called Crocker Park and it's like a big trip and it's a field trip and I have 3 kids, right? And so that's like a big deal. Load everybody in the car, drive 45 minutes away. I like to shop. So, but there are a lot of moments where I feel like my parenting was like, I was teetering like, why are you acting like this? Should you be, aren't you old enough to not, my son is 5. No, he's 6. Oh my gosh. Today he acted like he was 2, but I guess maybe that was like a big field trip. But yeah, no, I think parents just really, because I've even had coworkers say, just kind of pull me aside and say, like, my kid was handling something this way, because they know that, I work with autism and sometimes I help students who engage in problem behavior that's a barrier to their learning. And so people always kind of, pull on me and like ask me some questions. And I'm like, that's just like normal, what I mean? But when your own kid does it, you're like, why are you acting like this? Like, are you dysregulated? Yeah, no, I get that. That's good. So I know there's like a lot of different, milestones for people to think about. And I love that idea of, what is receptive, what is expressive. And, I'm actually coming out with a toddler course that is going to be for toddlers and preschool age students who have autism, really great for parents and professionals. But one of the things that we talk about is that including an observation is such an important piece of the assessment puzzle. Like sometimes, like you said, you had worked in a clinic. Oh, and you said you worked in a school too, right? School age.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a school, it's hard to get that observation in because we do have a lot of students to see. But I always say that I make sure that's really, really important. Sometimes, because I know I've always worked in a clinical setting too, until I started ABA speech. Sometimes that observation piece is hard to get, like sometimes you can't see the student around other kids. So you're kind of like asking, but like, we want to see like, how is the student communicating? Like you said, like they may be a struggling communicator, but they may be pulling their parent to something. They may be pointing, they may be making some noises. And I think that's all kind of important for parents to understand that those are all different ways that, our child is communicating. And sometimes that can be hard to see.
It can be hard to see when you're the parent, you're the one with them all the time.
Right.
And that's why, like, as a clinician for like the speech therapists out there, it's not just about the norm charts. Like, you have to look at the whole child and talk to the teachers or to the parents and saying, hey, what's happening? What are the struggles? What are they doing? How are they communicating? So you can get the big picture.
Right.
What exactly is going on?
So some of the products that you created, were they about assessment, or you said that they had to do with milestones? Were you like looking at a whole child approach, or was it something where you just kind of noted the milestones? Because I know when you sit down to like create I do more putting together talks and webinars, but I know that I've been like really knee deep in putting this course together. So my whole office, it looks really nice now, but previously, like I just finished recording it last week. And previously there were a lot of like books and like journal articles, and they're all kind of crammed under here now. But yeah, it's a lot of research. So what were you gathering the milestones for with those particular products?
So they're mainly milestones. And then I dive into like they're mostly like graphics of the milestones that are really easy to read.
Oh, okay.
The next page might be diving into the different terminology. What do they mean? Any background from this research that would be good to know. Any like caveats about that area. So the first one I made was speech. It was just called like speech language. And it's all the areas that SLPs treat, which is like a ton.
Yes.
So it's like everything from like vocab and feeding and social communication, literacy, like all these things. And then the other one that I just finished is only grammar, which is like a whole beast in and of itself.
Oh my gosh. You're like, okay, what do I do now? How do I work on, well, I have a designer, but we created some boom cards when the pandemic hit, for a regular past tense and, a regular plural, because there's just not a lot of information out there on how to work on those things. But I know there's just so much that goes into grammar. And I love that you made something about kind of the scope of a speech therapist, because we haven't never actually touched on that on this podcast. But I think sometimes that's hard for me as a speech therapist, because sometimes a parent will meet a speech therapist who maybe has never worked with an autistic student, or, vice versa. Another professional may meet a speech therapist who doesn't feel very comfortable working with autistic students. And I always get really defensive because, you learn about so many things. Like I took a whole course on dysphagia and aphasia. And, we have such a broad scope of practice that I feel like once we get out, some people are more generalists, but then other people have their, obviously I work in autism. Everybody kind of has their own niche area. And so it's hard for people to understand, because other professions don't understand how very broad our scope of practice is. So I think that's really cool that you made that, because I almost forget all the classes that we had to take. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's like a lot of those things we don't deal with on a daily, basis.
Right.
But it really depends on the setting you go work in and the age range and everything. But my friends who, their child gets diagnosed with apraxia or something, I always tell them,
yes,
there's find an SLP who has experience with this, because it's there's so many areas and you can't be an expert in them all.
No, you can't.
Can't.
No, and apraxia is one of those ones. I have had Carrie Ebert on. I had Laura Smith. I don't know if you know her. She's from Mommy SLP or something. Apraxia. She's just a wealth of information. She's she's just such a lovely person. And she has a child who, needed speech therapy. And she talked about her mom journey, her professional journey. And, we talked all about that. How do people find somebody who's specialized in that? Because I think that's the thing too, is that it's hard for parents to be savvy consumers. Because if you go to social media or you go to, it's hard to find somebody who really specializes in that. And then not everybody understands that our scope is so broad. But what was cool when Laura was on, she talked all about, she had a blog post that she wrote all about apraxia, and when you are the parent seeking services for your child, what questions you should ask. And I actually had a parent contact me that I had done a consult with before. And she said, wow, that was such a good episode. It gave me such great information. Because sometimes you just feel really overwhelmed. You just assume that somebody knows what they're doing, and maybe that's not, their niche area. So.
Yeah. I mean, the average parent would have no idea to know that.
Right.
So so my husband's a physician, and for them, they do med school and then they pick a specialty and they do my husband did an extra 4 years, and that's special. But with SLPs, there's no fellowship or residency for a specific area. So it's just
it's totally different. Yeah. And when you work in a school, it's here we go. What I mean? So you really have to, I remember a couple of years ago, now it's probably 5 years ago, but I had a couple students who stuttered, and I didn't feel really comfortable with that. So I work in a really great district, and, I think I use speechpathology.com, and I, was listening to Scott Yaris and, all the people that are the gurus. And I just really kind of was refreshing myself on that, because sometimes I think I just took one stuttering course. Sometimes you just take one course. And with autism, I mean, I didn't have I don't know. I'm older than you, I believe, but I didn't have
no courses.
Yeah. Did you have to take a course on autism or anything? Okay.
No.
Yeah. It's you're just kind of learning if that's your, when I got out, I worked 1 year as a school-based therapist, and then I really love working with autistic children. So then that's just what I focused on my whole career, but if you didn't, I never took a class, you know what I mean? It's not like you kind of learn like out in the trenches. So I think it's so cool that you're making these resources and doing this research and combing through it, because that can definitely be, a lot. It's a lot, right?
It's the most fun thing to comb through, but it's really helpful for both clinicians and parents to have norm charts to look at.
Yeah.
Just to base things off of. It's not the end all. Like, you really need to, like we touched on earlier, use all your expertise and knowledge to view the whole child and look into, their environmental factors, all these factors that play into a child's development.
Right.
Because we want a clear-cut hierarchy of like, what are they supposed to have and when, and like, what is this rigid like order of skills attained? That's just like not how it works though. So, and I feel like I came across getting those questions with these handouts I created, like, oh, is it this order? I'm like, especially with the grammar handouts resource. Right. It's not a specific order, especially with those older students. There's way too many variables that come into play as they get older. We have more strict guidelines and norm charts for like 0 to 4. Right. But kind of beyond that, it gets more fluid. Oh, I think it's just like the wild, wild west. So I think it's great when you're putting anything together for older students. I had Chris Winger on from Speech Dude. He was on and he works like in a high school because I'm a school-based therapist 3 days a week. And those 3 days I work with older students. It's really hard to get information about older students. It's really hard to find products. Like I created a product, Double Up, that's like a life skills vocabulary game, because they're really just, I feel like there isn't a lot of guidance, and everybody's interpretation of speech therapy services at that age is kind of different. What our role is. There's also just a lot of research. When I was looking at the grammar stuff, there's not a whole lot of research. Right. From. I know, and kids still need us. They still need our support. Still need to be knowledgeable. Yes, absolutely. So what is your kind of recommendation if, a parent is getting said norm chart and feels really kind of, stressed and realizes like, oh my gosh, I think my kid's really behind. Like, do you have any kind of, guidance for parents that might be listening and thinking like, oh my gosh, I think my kid is behind, or maybe they're on a wait list to get assessed, especially with the pandemic. I know a lot of kids that, and now that, who knows what's coming back now, but I feel like a lot of things might get pushed back. And then here these parents are not sure what to do and might be feeling anxious, I would imagine. But do you have any kind of recommendations for somebody feeling that way? Yeah. I mean, I always say, don't wait. Always go and try to get the referral from your pediatrician. And definitely try to find a specialist you can talk to, because the pediatricians are great, but their knowledge is so broad that really talking to someone who specializes in whatever you're concerned about is really the way to go. Whether it's a psychologist or a speech pathologist or an occupational therapist or whatever. And if you're waiting to be seen, which is definitely an issue right now, there are some free, depending on the state you live in or like the country you live in. Yeah. Especially for early, if your child's under 3, you might be able to find something funded through your city or state. So I would check into that. But it's rough. And at that, I don't know. It's hard. And if you're willing to pay out of pocket, for me, like if I was in that position, I might just go try to pay out of pocket to get an assessment or talk to someone just to I think that's what some people don't understand, that they can do that. They're definitely, every state is going to have their own built-in system on how to support any child that might need support from, a specialist, but that you can seek out a speech therapist and do private pay, which may be hard for a lot of people. But I don't know if everybody understands that is definitely the route they can do. It's always an option. It'll be way faster than through insurance. But I mean, if your insurance will pay for it, then that's awesome. Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. Wait lists. And I know I hear so many horror stories about, well, my child's on a wait list. And I think that's what's really cool about having an online presence and being able to give people information, is that
people are on a wait list and people are just waiting. They know that their child is a struggling communicator, and they want to know what to do in the meantime, to be able to support them at the home environment. So I love being able to connect with parents that way. Well, such good information. I love that. We always end the podcast with 2 little questions here. But what is the most important piece of advice that you want to pass along to parents or professionals about communication in general?
Oh, for professionals, I would say, to tie it to the whole norms chart thing, look at the whole child. Don't get sucked into these developmental stages. Look at everything going on, the background of the child, their culture, their disability, their diagnosis, anything like that. For example, so I have an example of my daughter right now that ties in perfectly with this. So she's 15 months old. She has 1 word and she's not walking. Oh. So if I were to tell someone that, they'd be like, oh, wow. She's,
right.
That sounds concerning.
Right.
But then I gave you a bigger picture of she has a syndrome. She was in the NICU for 2 months, couldn't even be on her back. I couldn't hold her upright. So she wasn't getting any of that gross motor stuff her first 2 months of life. She's had 3 surgeries. She started sitting at 10 months, walking at 12 months. She had a cleft palate, which really put her back speech-wise. She wasn't able to babble really prior to that or making different sounds.
Right.
And that kind of opens up a bigger picture. So I've been in communication. She has all these specialists lined up. So I can talk directly to the PT. The PT is not concerned. Right.
Right.
So when you look at the bigger picture, that can sometimes change things a lot. So for professionals, I would say be sure you're looking at the whole child and not getting sucked into developmental charts and what should be happening.
Yeah.
And for parents, I would say, if you're looking at norm charts, first of all, you're a great parent.
Yes.
So do not don't be oh my gosh, I'm a bad parent. My kid's behind. That's not your fault. That's not what's going on.
Right.
And time is precious, especially when they're so little. So don't wait.
I love that.
If you're concerned, put things in motion. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah. Trust your gut. Oh my gosh. Great. Love that. Thanks for sharing that parental perspective too. We all appreciate that. Your kids are both adorable, by the way. And you're going to tell everybody where we can find you so they can see you doing your awesome wakeboarding. So where can people find out more about you and your work, Allison?
Yeah. So my website is AllisonFors.com. My TPT store is Allison Fors. I'm on all social media, all the things, but the one I'm most active on is Instagram, and that is speech.AllisonFors.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And if you haven't already, make sure that you check out abaspeech.org. I am launching a toddler/preschool course that is awesome for parents and professionals. And it is all about autism and getting started with communication. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review. I always love hearing from you, and make sure to keep things fun and functional. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Autism Outreach. If you enjoyed the show today, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode full of actionable strategies you can use in your therapy room. Write a review too. That would mean so much to me. I always love hearing from you. Have a specific topic that you want included on a future show? Reach out over on Instagram, ABA Speech by Rose, or visit me at www.abaspeech.org.